It feels so good to take this mask off. How are y'all? I'm Ray Carter. I'm the general manager for WSB-TV here in Atlanta. And my co-moderator today, Dave Hart from RBL, general manager there, and our chair of the GAB. So we're grateful to have you here, and we'll get a little bit of a scene setter. Dave's going to introduce our panel, but a conversation with Bob and I, almost exclusively for the last year and a half, has begun with how you holding up. Whether it was civil unrest or political upheaval or a pandemic or getting our people back in the building and then telling them, just kidding, all of you back out. It has been trying, not just for the leadership team, but for the staff, for the rank and file, for the crews in the field that have been verbally assaulted, spit on, called every name, heckled via social media. And we're in an environment now where it is so polarized that we felt it necessary to bring in a mental health expert for our news staff and then for the entire staff to talk about hitting that emotional wall that came with COVID-19, that came with political, racial unrest. And I have to tell you, it was shocking when we put that first session in place, and it was via Teams or via Zoom, and he opened this thing up and people started sobbing. And we knew we had really struck a nerve and that they were struggling. And we knew they were. We had talked about it in our management meetings again and again, but we didn't know how significant it was. This frustration, the fear of the unknown. What's next? Do I even want to be doing this anymore? And so Bob and I got to talking, and Dave, and we thought, you know what, we can put our heads in the sand and act like it's just going to get better. Don't worry about it, nothing to see over here. Our staffs deserve that we talk about this and figure out ways that we can create better environments in our radio and television stations so that we are taking the pulse of our people, listening carefully to them, and helping them work through these issues. And so that's what this session is today. And I've got to give a lot of credit to Bob, who really from the heart said it was tearing him up to watch what was going on across this state, radio and TV personnel. And he wanted to do something about it. So Bob, thank you for this session.
You scared the hell out of me.
Dave, if you would be kind enough to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be with you today. I'm just going to introduce our panel. We've got just some phenomenal people. Adam Murphy's with WGCL CBS 46 here in Atlanta. He's a reporter. Tracy McKinney's the managing editor at Ray Station, WSB. John Clark, many of you know him as a board member and with the Georgia News Network. He's moderating our lunchtime discussion on high school sports. And my old friend and colleague, Scott Elledge, is the director of digital journalism and content at WJBF. Scott was telling this group earlier, Scott and I go so far back. He was a director of the newscast I would produce in Spartanburg 30 years ago. So it's great to have him with us and great to have all of you with us. When you think about, we're still obviously in the pandemic. It hasn't changed. When you think about all the events that got crammed in to 2020 and how in many ways Georgia was the ground zero for so much of it. Think about the CDC being based in Atlanta and the information that was coming out of there. So we dealt with a pandemic, which is a once in a career type event to deal with. Then we had the social justice movement in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Then we had the most polarized election that you'll probably ever encounter in your lifetime. And now let's throw in 2 Senate races where the whole balance of power in Washington is dependent upon what we decide here in Georgia. And in so many of those instances, our journalists were absolutely, like they always are, right there on the front line to report whether it was the people were locked down and there was no traffic reports, I guess, here in Atlanta there for a couple of weeks. Just the impact that was having on the economy, the debate about reopening, and just so much to cover within a year. And in many ways, our crews were targeted like they never had been before. We just had that anger, stress, the outrage, just at times would boil over. And so we saw news cars burned, we saw reporters, beat up by some police officers, sometimes by protesters. It really, really was a tough year. So when you look back at the pandemic, I'll just start the conversation. I want to say very much, this is a conversation. We really want to hear from those of you that are with us today as well, along with the panel. When you look back at the pandemic, what was the most challenging aspect of it for you as a journalist? What was the most difficult thing that you personally dealt with in trying to cover this unprecedented story? We've never been through it even as in our lifetimes. So just start off with that.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Al.
Well, first of all, Ray and Bob and others, thank you guys for having this conversation. I think it may be probably the most important conversation that we have this year and moving forward as we all adapt as journalists and learn how to handle this situation, because it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. I think for me, and I'm a reporter, longtime reporter, 18 years in Atlanta for CBS 46, in the industry for 23 years, and just like the rest of us, we've never seen anything like this. And I think at the beginning, it was quite exciting because it was something big and it was something new to cover. And then quickly we realized we're all hamsters and hamster wheels. And we're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over. And to me, that was the most difficult part of it, because you're looking for new angles, different ways to tell the story. You feel like, man, this is kind of redundant. I'm doing the same thing. And then it was really new to everyone and quite concerning. I mean, we didn't know what to expect. We're the guys that are on the front lines, not the sidelines, as I would say. And so we're out there, and there was a period here in Georgia where I think maybe we were closed for, shut down, I say, for about a couple of weeks or less. And I mean, I was reporting from my living room in my backyard every day, and I had, and it was great. I mean, I had my studio set up with, I had a garage light that I lit up the whole room and everything was really nice, and then the logo in my flat screen. Got kind of joked at for my bookshelf with some Emmys in the back. Oh, what are you showing off here? Yeah, right. And Gabby's. They were on the shelf.
You got a hardware shelf.
That's right. And so, we were doing that for a while, and then it was right back out on the street, and the unknown of this pandemic and the redundancy of what we were covering, and it just, all of that combined, you're scared, don't know what to expect, and because this is a deadly virus, and you're covering the same thing over and over, so burnout happens really quick, and it's kind of been an uphill battle, quite frankly, in my opinion, ever since, and that to me has been the most challenging thing, is trying to be creative and trying to stay fresh and not burn out.
I don't think it changed for me over time. So like you, initially it was exciting because I think, we cover stories, but there are times when those stories really become critical information, and this was that time where people were dependent on us to give them the information they need, because none of us knew what this was and what was happening. And so that was exciting at first, but as we went through the year, I started to notice things in I'm a manager, so I'm managing editor, and I was in Pittsburgh for a big part of it, and then came to Atlanta, so I've seen it from two different states that operated completely differently. Pennsylvania was extremely strict. I was sharing with them earlier, we were on, I always say lockdown, it wasn't lockdown. We had a stay-at-home order for 3 months, and they actually had a task force that would go out and look for violators. And so we could go to the grocery store, the big box stores, the gas station, and work. That was it. And they would pull liquor licenses of places that opened up, and it was very serious. And there were Pittsburgh lost a lot of restaurants and small businesses because they couldn't survive. So trying to, for me, the challenge was trying to manage the anxiety of my team. So it went for them from being excited to being drained, to being afraid, there were people, I had one photographer who said to me, I wanted him to go live downtown, and he was like, oh no, I don't feel safe there. And I said, where? Downtown. At all downtown? No. And I was like, why? Well, anybody could walk up to me at any point and they're not wearing a mask. And I'm like, oh, in all of downtown? So these are the types of things, you know, that were
Trying to be
happening.
sensitive at the
Right.
same time.
It's tough.
Right.
You know, it's a challenge, and you know, we just erred on the side of, you know, we're not out there, they are. And, you know, they're encountering people who are not respectful of the virus, and I don't want anybody to get it, I don't want anybody to die. So in that case, we'd say, okay, do it live, and we'll just move on, you know. And so it was just constantly trying to adapt to manage that anxiety, make sure our team was okay so that they could do their jobs, and just be flexible about how we did it.
John,
Yeah, with us, a little bit of all that, and we run not only the Georgia News Network out of our place, we also handle the South Carolina Radio Network and the Virginia News Network out of Atlanta, and some other markets that we do for iHeart. So we have, you know, we had probably 250 radio stations that were dependent on us to go from, you know, just changing the way we did things pretty much overnight, from leaving a newsroom, going out all over the place. Everybody had to pretty much go home and start figuring out how to do it from home. And so all of a sudden, like, well, what do I do? And how do I do this? You know, I got a laptop, what do I do? But fortunately, the company iHeart was great in giving us everything that we needed to do that. But still, we had to do that and realize that we have 250 radio stations that are flipping the switch every hour, and we better be there. And so that was pressure. Our people did a great job. I think we've come out the other side of it a much more well-oiled machine than we were going in. It's been very, very good for us. I think we're hitting on all cylinders. We're opening new facilities in the next few months, and you know it's going to be the news people will go back in and all. But it's that was our big challenge, was how to do it. And the same thing in covering the story. We immediately started doing hourly reports on the pandemic, and you're like, I can't believe we're doing reports every hour on a pandemic. This is bizarre. So how do you keep that? What angle do you cover it from? And after a while, you're like, we're out of ideas, you know. So, but we did it, and thanks to Matt McClure's our news director, and we have a great news staff, well-seasoned professionals, and we just did it, and we're still doing it. Some people go in every now and then. I go in every couple of weeks. But that was our big challenge.
Challenges of change.
Challenges of change, quick change, just like that too. It really was. Yeah.
Scott?
For us, I can echo everything that they have said. We did not talk before this meeting, but everything they're saying, it holds true, I think, for just about everyone. For us, in my position, I live in contingencies. How do we prepare for this? What are we going to do? Now, our job is to provide that news and information for our viewers, keep them up to date on what's going on. How are we going to do that if we're not healthy? And so we broke our station up into three parts. Somebody working from home, utilizing one of our studios for photographers and MMJs only, and then our core staff being our reporters or anchors and producers and directors, our technical staff. So we wanted to separate everyone as much as possible and still provide the news of the day. And even for our jaded, senior, tenured photographers and producers that have been there for a while, that mix of excitement and fear came into play. I mean, this is something big, a big event that we've never seen. What are we going to do? How are we going to cover this? And then the realization, this is going to impact us, my family, parents, children. This is everyone. So their safety came into mind, in my mind, first thing. And so we had to find ways to execute a newscast, to get that message out to our viewers. And we just pulled every tool, every resource we could to make that happen. Assigning photographers and reporters a vehicle, their gear, take it home, we're working from home. We will Skype in for all of our editorial meetings. Everything will be done remotely. And in that process, we discovered that there's some efficiencies here. There's things that we can do. We can interview globally now. We don't have to be just in Georgia. We can reach out and get connected with folks and bring them in and share that information to our viewers. So we really took it as an approach as how do we expand on what we're doing already? And how do we keep everyone safe in this process? And just meeting with our folks regularly, checking in, because you can sometimes be on an island if you're working out of your apartment or out of your home. how do you keep those guys engaged with the newsroom? So that was very, very critical and very important to us to make sure our editorials were maintained as much as normalcy as possible on a day-to-day basis. Finding the stories, finding new ideas, new angles and new approaches, you know, because you're watching the national news, that's like a continuous running scoreboard of how many people are infected today. It's a constant thing that the viewers are being pounded. Now, if you did the same thing, you ran a lower third, this is how many people have been diagnosed with cancer today. So you hit that 1 million mark, like, wow, this is scary, I'm not going to eat, drink, or do anything. So we had to put it into perspective and just try to bring that truth of what's happening in Georgia, and for us specifically in the local communities. We're really hyper local focused. And one thing that we said is just stay focused, remain intelligent, be smart when you're in the field, have the mask, even the microphones, we had mic stands that we converted into extenders to interview folks to keep a safe distance. But it's just a matter of being smart, staying focused, and using every ounce of technology that we can find, even to the point of using cell phones for a camera to do live shots. We pulled everything out of our pockets. With that, we've learned a lot, and we're able to utilize those tools even now as we're kind of getting back into that normal environment.
We took a similar approach when you talk about the numbers, and I think company-wide, not just our station at WSB, but we wanted to make sure we we're putting those numbers in perspective and with context. So, because it seems so alarming, if you just give the raw number and you just say how many people have it, but how many people survive? Okay, this many people died, but how many people survive, right?
Exactly right.
So that people aren't overwhelmed with,
Getting that clarity is
Yeah.
absolutely critical.
And that wasn't easy based on the sources of information that were coming to us. I mean, Chuck and I talked a lot about our local Department of Health. They just didn't know what they were doing. And it was tough.
Yeah.
And you know they've got a tough job, so you can spend some time beating up on them, or you can try to, work through it with them. So I know from our perspective, that was another thing, was just getting good information that you could relay and be able to put it into some context.
exactly.
And that was not always easy.
So at Augusta University, we're at a direct line, open line with Dr. Philip Cool at Augusta University. And it was a twice, 3 times a day conversation. What are you seeing? What's happening? What are these numbers really, what do they reflect? So that was absolutely critical for us locally. And of course, AU received a huge grant for some research, which was wonderful to have. But it's just maintaining and watching that information and being in contact with the actual source, the guys in charge of infection and infectious disease. This was our main source, and we relied on that. And this is straight from the horse's mouth. This is what's really happening today. Forget CNN, forget all these other places. Look at our community, look at our state, and see what's happening here. And that's something that we really focused on without hyping it.
I'm assuming, and I don't want to assume, but every one of you was probably sent home when the pandemic went, correct?
Yep.
Was anybody not sent home? Really?
We, in a three-way separation meant that I had
Not?
A team, B team, and a C team. And what we did, we took if the A team became infected,
Yeah, we had a.
we're out of the
yeah.
we're out of the mix. Can the B team handle it if we're all out? Same for the C team. So
That cascading approach was very,
Yes.
very smart and saved a lot of our people because we did have quite a few infections, unfortunately. And did not,
I had a very different situation. I'm general manager of 6 radio stations in Northwest Georgia. I'm also on the Rome City Commission. So I was seeing it from the government side, I was seeing it from the management side, I was seeing it from the news side. And I think we all come out of this with a little bit of traumatic stress. I mean, because sitting here and listening to the stories kind of reminds me of really how I barreled through something because of have to. We had to take the governor's orders and institute them on a government level in our city. I had to make sure, now our staff was held safe. I mean, we were able to isolate in individual areas of a relatively large complex, and no one had personal contact that came in to do anything along those lines right there. And if anyone had any symptoms or whatever, they were quarantined. So we operated through it, but the thing that with the news aspect of it, and I really was sitting here and listening, and truly, we had to add elements to the content of our news as far as how we presented it that we'd never done before. There were not only what you had to base hard facts, but it also rolled into where people had issues with things that once upon a time that really weren't an issue. So you had to be much more careful in the content and the delivery of the content to make sure that it was true information, socially acceptable information, and it was quite a trying time.
Can I ask how many of you are back?
Pretty much.
Everybody back here? What was it like, and how did you feel coming back? And were you confident that your company had the correct protocols in place to keep you safe?
I would think so. I work with Nexstar, and so at the time I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm not the most technological person, so I was reporting from home at that time. So I was really happy to be back into the newsroom where it's easier, I think, it is to work in an actual newsroom than to be from home when you're not the most technical person sending stories back to work. So I was happy to return.
Did all of you feel safe when you were asked to come back, and you felt like the correct protocols were in place to keep you safe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
David is the GM at our station. There's a couple of WRBL employees here, but none of them ever came to me with any issues of safety. We did a really good job of keeping COVID to a minimum during the whole thing. It was really from beginning to end, and it's still going on. We still have masks in our building, regardless of vaccination status. And I think that's helped a lot of our folks, the folks that were remote, come back and feel safe. And I agree with what all you said. We learned so much working remotely that we're able to put forward now. And I think, silver lining, I hate to say that with COVID, but we did learn a lot with that we can implement going forward. But for the most part, I think our folks are excited to be back and feel safe doing that.
I'll share with you something that we got from an employee survey that we happen to be doing company-wide. It happened to hit in the spring of '21, and we had these results come back, and it was really perfect timing because we were asking people to come back in. And 82% of our staff at WSB said that they were comfortable with the company's position on bringing them back and felt like the protocols were correctly in place. And we thought, 8 out of 10 on anything is off the charts. So we knew we had done it the right way. We asked another question, and that was, are you confident you will not get COVID-19 by coming back? Only 33% of our staff said, yeah, I'm confident. So they felt like the proper protocols were in, but don't think for a second that people aren't nervous about that exposure.
I think part of that has to do with the fact that the virus keeps mutating. So with the knowledge we have today, yeah, it'll come back. But then what's going to happen next week? You just don't know. I mean, because we brought people back and had to send them back home, and so I don't think any of us can be 100% confident about what's going to happen, especially after the holidays. There's projections that we might see another surge. So, I think people, and God bless the CDC, they have a terribly awesome job to do, but they've had to change their position so many times over the course of this that I think the average person, forget journalists, can't figure out what is what. You know what I mean? What do you trust?
And yet we have the responsibility of telling them what is what, but we're like,
We don't know.
we don't know. Don't listen to us. We don't know much more than you do. Yeah, so
Exactly.
we did. Think about a company size. I work for Hart, and you think about a company that size. I got to tell you, I was blown away by how great of a job they did. It was whatever we needed. You need a new laptop, you got it. It's on the way. You need a mic, you got it. Whatever you need. If you work from home, if you need an engineer to talk you through it, no problem. It was all hands on deck. And you think a company that large, and we're in Atlanta, which is a pretty significant size market, but we're talking, you felt like even for your little division the newsroom, you know, they were right there for you, and it was amazing to watch. And you know, the one thing I missed though, and everybody else would probably say this, is the energy of the newsroom though. Yeah, I would go into there. I was one of the few people who would go in the building, and it would be all dark, and I'd be the only one. And one of my counterparts over in Alabama, I was talking to him one day, and is anybody in? He goes, I'm in. He goes, I feel like the captain of a ghost ship floating on the ocean. And what he said was so dramatic. I'm like, wow, you can't put any better than that. So I was very happy with it.
Yeah, a quiet newsroom is eerie.
Yeah, oh, it is. It's still
What's
here.
going on here?
Yeah, I just go in every couple of weeks to make sure it's still there. You know,
Something
so,
that we dealt with that I don't think many stations deal with nowadays is we're stationed. We are not automated in our production.
yeah.
So we have a camera operator in the studio, we have an audio operator, we have a director, we have somebody who runs graphics, our producers. They're all in a room that's maybe a third the size of this room. And you know, most of our production folks, I mean, they were making the bare minimum of what, you know, our company would pay. And these were people who need those jobs. They could not afford to say, you know, I can't come in. And I still look back at that and just in amazement. We never had one single person say, I'm not gonna do this. You know, we you know, as we were kind of learning, as we went, we added some partitions where there was some separation. Obviously, we had masks once we realized that masks were, we thought about one day it's one thing, the next thing, once we realized masks was something that would be beneficial, we did add that. But, you know, our production people, I mean, we sent probably 60% of our news people were out the door. If you know, if our producers would produce from home and then come in and booth the show. But our production people were there, you know, morning, noon, night, weekends, and you know, and that's where, and again, that's where we probably saw the most number of infections. Thankfully, nothing super serious, but you know, as I look back at it, it was surreal. I mean, I remember, Chuck, remember your interview with Doug Collins?
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
I felt safer in the station than I did covering political events. No. I ended up in quarantine twice.
Yeah.
Once because when Doug Collins announced that he had been in contact with somebody at CPAC, I just, all of a sudden you could hear me, and I said something I probably shouldn't have said in the newsroom. Somebody called me and said, Doug Collins. And I said, what? And they said, how close of contact? And I showed them a picture. It's the last knee-to-knee interview I ever did.
Yeah.
We were closer than the two of y'all doing a knee-to-knee 3 days before.
Okay. Behind that photo.
And she was with me as an intern. We were both in the room.
I remember that day vividly.
And then I'm in Manchester covering the counter rally to Biden's campaign stop in Warm Springs, and all of a sudden 2 days later, Drew Ferguson, I got COVID. And somebody says, how close were you to him? I said, I interviewed him for 20 minutes sitting side by side in his truck. Was that close enough? And they're letting me, you need to go get tested right now. I mean, you know, but it literally was the situation where I was in a lot of political situations covering it. And it seemed like every time I covered a Republican event, I ended up having to go get a COVID test. And I never encountered it. And I'm not saying that politically, I'm just saying that that's the fact of life. And then like, I couldn't get within 6 feet, literally, of Warnock and Ossoff. I could yell my questions to them, but it was the way the two parties did it was very, very different.
Yeah.
But, and at this point, for now it's both sides politically, and out there covering in the field is I get tested, I still like get tested regularly even though I'm vaccinated. I was part of that group of reporters on very week one when Brandon Beach tested positive. And, you know, he's sick, doesn't tell any of us, and then gets tested, doesn't tell any of us, then tells us afterwards. We were part of that first group of state capitol reporters who, you know, like really? So, and I feel like all of us, I mean, as much as our operations did for us, we were living under somebody else's rules. We were living under the state house rules and the state senate rules. And this week I covered RNC events and John Ossoff and everybody I've covered, and I'm still getting tested regularly because I just feel like you have to, because the masks are effectively gone at any political event at this
I mean,
point.
there may never be another perfect storm like that, where you had COVID
Oh, yeah.
and you have biggest political year that we've seen, and we were the epicenter
Oh,
in
yeah.
the state of Georgia for anything and everything politically, and it was all happening at the same time. So, it makes sense why, there's a lot of concern, there was burnout, I mean, it was just constant.
Well, it was just mental exhaustion.
It was.
It
was.
because I also worked on the press club debates, and it's like, how are we gonna pull this off? It was all of it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that exhaustion. Let's talk about the emotional toll that this has taken, because we have to remember what was happening at that time. We had in Atlanta riots. I mean, torching police cars and buildings and ransacking Buckhead and shutting down restaurants for 6 months. It was frightening. We had security with all of our crews that were out covering this. Not only did we have racial unrest, we had political unrest. We had a crew that had been cornered. Do you remember how frightening the video was? We had a reporter who was first by himself, and then there was a mob of counter the election. The election was stolen crowd came and cornered him, and his photographer had the camera up on his shoulder, and they rushed him, and you could hear the reporter say, "Just put the camera down, just put it down." And as soon as he did, then they recognized that they were not going to get what they wanted, which they wanted. They wanted the confrontation. As soon as he put it down, and then you could literally see, and all of this is on video, our reporter stepping back away from this crowd, and when the camera turns and you see the size of the crowd, probably 60 or 70 people there, with 2 people, ours, who could have been seriously injured. I'm watching this video as a general manager, and my heart is racing, thinking, what if? What if they got him on the ground? They could have kicked him, they could have killed him. Terrifying. So let's talk about the fear, the emotional exhaustion that goes with the pandemic, the unrest, political polarization, your own health, your family's health, your concerns. What have you done personally for yourselves to keep yourselves sane and mentally healthy? What have your companies done? What have your stations done?
It was interesting. One of the very first, we got a mayor, Skip Henderson, on this, and I was interviewing Skip a week into it. And we were talking about the pandemic, and he was a more progressive mayor than the state was being on some stuff, and these Republicans was more progressive. But I started asking tough questions. It was right after David's conversation where he said, you gotta be careful with DPH, and David was kind of giving me some guidance. And finally, Skip stopped in the middle of an interview, and I've been covering it for 35 years. And he said, listen, there's gonna come a day for accountability. It's coming, but the day isn't the day. When that day comes, you're gonna hold me accountable, we're gonna hold the Georgia Department of Public Health accountable. He goes, they're even gonna hold you accountable. And when he said it, it just caused me to stop, and it's like, dang, he's right. I mean, that point changed the way I covered the whole pandemic, because as I moved through it and moved through the political parts of it as well, I was extremely careful to say, can I defend my actions here? If they start holding me as a journalist accountable for what I put on the air, for what I put online, or how I've asked the question, can I be accountable? And I would have never thought about it that way had not a politician challenged me in the middle of an interview. And I wish I had that on tape, because I would play it back to every journalism class and listen, because he was right. It was like I was sitting there on the high horse, and he just took the horse and lowered the legs.
Who was? Oh, it was the mayor. I was just remembering it was Skip.
The mayor. Sorry, it's me.
Did
Small
anybody lose a colleague in the,
We lost someone who went on the ventilator early in the pandemic, October. Her sister, who texted with me every day, said, I don't know what to do. I think they're putting her on too early. and there was nothing at that point you could do, and this was when they thought putting people on ventilators would contain the virus for the health professionals. Well, I asked Gray if they would keep her on full pay, because Gray was awesome. They gave anyone who had COVID 2 weeks special PTO, so they didn't have to use their vacation. And this woman was on a ventilator for over 10 weeks, and I asked Gray, and they agreed to keep her on full pay. She finally expired because her blood oxygen level fell below 80, and that's pretty much it. So that was kind of rough, but Gray did the right thing and paid her and her family out. Oh, and just a little interesting side note, she became a Gray employee one day before she went in the hospital. And I was on the phone with her the previous day, because she said she wasn't feeling well, and I said, have you signed up for benefits? And she said, not yet. And I said, well, I'll help you, let me help you. She said, no, my sister's gonna help me. Well, anyway, I made sure she was on benefits, because I didn't really think she had COVID, but she said her stomach was bad, it just didn't sound good. Anyway, she made it under the wire, and they paid out everything, every life insurance, every whatever she had in her benefits.
Did her passing change how you led your team?
I think it really hit home that it was possible to die from this. I mean, even though, you know, depending on your age and comorbidities and all that. I think it brought it down to the level of this is what can happen. And I think it made people a little more fearful, I would say. She was kind of in an isolated area of her work at another station that I managed, so she was not really interacting with anyone. But, you know, that caused some concern, just that she was in the building. So there were lots of people that didn't want to be in that building for a while. You know, I did pay once to clean, my station. That was also in the early days when we didn't know how long it stayed on surfaces. And I didn't get ripped off as badly as some people did.
Yeah,
I'm not in the industry, but it still cost a few $1,000s. I was glad I did it at the time. And that was a sight too, seeing people in pretty much full hazmat gear walking around the station. It gave it kind of a, you know, what was that movie with Dustin Hoffman, that one? It was a little creepy. But I think it made people pay attention and follow the protocols that we had.
We had someone, not died from COVID, but someone that, he was in a different part of the company than we were, but he passed away from cancer during COVID. And, you know, before we went on lockdown, we thought he was doing great. He'd been in the hospital, but he got out of the hospital. And this is somebody we kept up with him all the time, knew him very closely. And he passed away of cancer during COVID. And many of us didn't know it for a couple of months. So you're like, what? That's just kind of shocking. So you're like, wow, you know, guys see every day. So it wasn't COVID, but still it kind of affected us. And even when I go in there now, I go by his booth, and you're like, oh my gosh, he passed away. So it was kind of shocking.
But also business administrator, and she was the first person that every new employee would meet.
Oh,
The orientation, HR.
yeah.
She had been working remotely pretty much for, you know, since March, and she passed away in early January. And I had one, you know, I remember talking to Gene Kirkconnell, who was our former news director, early on. I said, I got one goal, is to get us all through this hole.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we lost Vicki, it was just brutal. I mean, she, you know, 2 offices over from me, you know, we have a 3-person admin team, and it was just, it just brought, like you said, brought it home that, you know, this was real, you know, and it was, you know, this was somebody who everybody knew at the station. It was just really, really tough. And then we really couldn't even mourn together. I mean, that was the other thing, a piece of it. And, you know, she called me on New Year's Eve, you know, said she'd been tested positive, you know, that was I think a Thursday. They had to take her to the hospital Saturday morning. You know, she stopped breathing on the way to the hospital. She died on Tuesday. I mean, it's just less than a week having a, you know, normal conversation. And it was just brutal. And then, you know, again, it's, you know, I'm mourning by email.
Yeah.
I lead my staff through mourning by email. You know, sending them, you know, this is something I would normally gather my team together. I walk through the building and talk to them individually. And I'm sending out, you know, a cold email. So to me, that was just, you know, I don't know, you know, it's the lowest point, you know, in my whole career, you know, emotionally, so it's just.
The number of weddings and funerals we did on Zoom.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask, those who are managing staffs, how do you have your antenna up? How do you know when somebody is hitting that emotional wall? Whether it's they have a family member who's passed or they've been verbally assaulted on social media?
That is a huge challenge, because you do want your finger on the pulse of your crew and your team. You want to know how their well-being is doing, not just how they're executing in the field and what they're doing on a work day. So we will see that on TV, but it took a Herculean effort for myself and my management team to reach out to every employee daily. How are you? How's your family? How are you feeling? How are you holding up? So again, you have our experienced, jaded, hard-nosed photographer who's been doing this for 30 years and can face a train down and won't bother. Almost in tears because they lost a family member. So then you take our younger MMJs, young producers that have moved to Augusta. Now they're away from their mom and dad and can't see their mom and dad because they're in a frontline position out in the field. So you become that surrogate parent for that person. You're there for them. What do you need? What can I do? Are you okay on food? I mean, it's a constant communication, an open line of communication with everyone. Now we did lose an employee, not to COVID, but suicide, and this was in the middle of all this. Heartbreaking, shocking, and it's something that, again, the way you mourn this, and as David said, not being able to go hug someone or get eyeball to eyeball with someone and tell them what's happened. And that is the hard, traumatic part. And just imagine, experienced, older, jaded photographer, and now you have this young person away from home for the first time living in this environment. That is a struggle. And so you become a family at that time, even though you're not in the same room together, but you're calling, texting, emailing, and then the social part of it as well. You know, ensuring your staff that, listen, take the word media out of it for just a minute. Make sure that you're giving that impression that you're local news. Your job is to gather information and provide to your community. We're a news organization. We're towing that objective line every day. Don't get caught up in this hype. Don't just stay away from it. Just ensure everyone that, you know, and talking about your experience, horrifying, because we're in a time now of backpack. TVU and one MMJ out covering and doing a live shot, completely blinded. You're doing a live shot, you have no awareness of what's around you. Yeah. Well, how that changed from one person to now it's 3 photographers to report it, somebody watching and making sure that they are protected. There's nothing going to come up behind them. So all those elements go into what we're doing even today. Our Atlanta Bureau Chief that we share with David, when covering the protests, like, okay, Archie, you cannot do this by yourself, and we could not send anyone. It's like, Archie, you're down the street a block away, and make sure there's nothing behind you. You're getting B-roll, you're not going wide, you're gonna shoot this and get somewhere safe to do your stand-up.
It's tough for Art, because he wants to be in the middle.
Yeah.
There's also
That's
a
something I
mentality, yeah.
That was something I found. I found that it was harder to convince the reporters not to go because they wanted to cover the story. And it's like, I need you to be safe. I need you to stand, you know, and so I found that was a challenge.
You had to have some harsh conversations with people saying, I'm not kidding.
Right.
Because they would put themselves in harm's way thinking, I can always get out. And maybe you can't.
Right. And some of them, they felt like it's my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. This
And
is
sometimes our job is to protect them from doing their job.
What's in your DNA to run to the fire, not from it. I mean, it's hardest that you cannot run to the fire this time.
Right.
You have to stand back and protect yourself so that you can complete this story. If you get yourself in danger, you know, you're not, it's not your job to be the story.
Yeah.
Please stay back. I mean, and yeah, I've had several arguments with my staff about doing this.
So Adam, you're on the street. You had people coming up to you, and probably still do, who want to give a little running commentary on what they think of you.
Yeah, for me, touching on the point you guys are on right now, you know, seasoned journalists, they have a gauge in their gut. And you know when you're out there, you just from the experience of doing it, you know when you're in a situation that you feel is gonna be okay and when it's not okay. And you have to have the courage to stand up. And I think managers now, because of everything we're going through and because of the high temperature of, dealing with COVID and dealing with the political stuff and the social unrest, I should say. Managers now, I think even more so than before, are way more understanding about that. And the crews in the field, need to do what's in their gut, and if it's just not right, if it doesn't feel good, then you have to feel comfortable picking up the phone and saying, look, I really don't want to get into this. It's a large crowd. There's, a lot of people in there. I don't know, that they're going to be pleased with us right in the middle of the mix, especially if it's a crowd that's, protesting something.
And we have to listen.
That's right.
Yes.
And
We're
what I'm
on the
saying
other
is,
side of the,
yeah.
the other end of the phone. have
and
to
I
listen.
think most managers, I've never really had a problem with that. I know that comes up, but I think even more so now than ever before, managers are really understanding about that.
Absolutely.
And you just gotta say something. If it's just not right, in your gut, if it's not right, you gotta say something.
Before COVID, this political climate, managers, editors on the newspaper side and news directors on the side they would listen to an Adam or me if we called in and said, hey, this situation's out of control, because they know we've been in it before. Now they're listening to the people that have 1 year or less experience.
That's correct.
That where in the past, they may not have listened as intently to that new person as they do now. And I think that's been the biggest change I've seen is younger reporters.
Yes.
It's a great change.
They're being heard.
Well, not only
Good.
that, managers are telling those that are a little less experienced or newer in the market, saying, hey, listen, if you're uncomfortable, then let us know and don't go right into the fire, so to speak.
Well,
A part of our title is lessons learned, and we've set the scene even more dramatic than I imagined that we would. But next month, are things different? What are we going to do with the mandates? What are we going to do with the shots? What are we going to do with the booster shot when that becomes an issue next week, or for some of us at Moderna? How are we going to deal? What are the next 90 days going to hold? And I don't know if it's going to answer, but per se. But what are the lessons we've learned 20 plus months into this that we're going to use it till the end of the year, or the start of next year, or the first cold weather after the holidays? We brought that up. Yeah.
I think a lot of us work for larger companies that they will dictate what that looks like.
The problem with that is, is that they're in New York or California, and I just know from watching in Chicago, they think differently. We can't even get into Washington D.C. yet.
We're fortunate, ours is based here in
Right,
Atlanta.
right, that's a big difference.
And we have somebody in each of our markets that helps them make the decision. So if there's a company edict that says by October 1, this many people are coming back in, this percentage of your staff, each of our markets has the ability to say, that won't work in my market, and here's why. So any GM can overrule that, but there has to be some sort of cadence, some sort of policy that the company says, this is what we think. We've consulted with, oddly enough, we consult with OSHA, not just the CDC, but OSHA has been a great tool. And then our company hired a consultant who is helping us step through this. And I know a lot of people have that same obligation to their companies, where the company will tell them pretty much what you're going to do.
Nexstar's pretty laissez-faire when it comes to that, actually, believe it or not. They
They leave the decision to you.
In the hands of the general manager. I try to get guidance.
Sure.
I've got a great RVP she's not winding the trees, she's runs stations, she knows she's doing. I think from our perspective, we stay pretty flexible. I've got at least 2 employees that have immediate family members that they care for who have chronic health issues. And they asked, could they just continue to work from home? And I said, as long as I don't see a drop off in your productivity, that's fine with me. This is the first time the staff's heard that. I didn't make it a public, edict, but that's working for us. But we have to just keep an eye on things. I actually reached out to the mayor's office a couple weeks ago because it just felt like things were starting to get back to normal. I wanted to see some data. What's it really like in Columbus? Are infection rates up, down, hospitalizations? Is this receding? You know, and they wouldn't send me the information. So I'm kind of having to keep an eye on it. I know I have at least 2 employees who just, they will not wear masks. I keep an eye on them, particularly when they're right, you know, with somebody. I'll say, back off, do it remotely, call them on the phone. You know, that really, you talk about frustrating, that pulls at me, because, you know, I probably should push it. I think at least with one of them, they'd like me to, for other reasons I can't get into. But, you know, that's very frustrating,
Yeah.
you know, to deal with. Particularly with, you know, when you know you have people that are still scared, you know,
Yeah.
justifiably so.
We're going
Yeah.
through a dramatic change at iHeart in that I started out, I hated working from home, and I always tell my boss, man, I hate this. I'm not built for this. Now I love it. I love it. And he's like, you know, can't believe it. So iHeart's retooling everything now. We're going into a new facility either later this year or the first part, and they're doing this all over the country, where, because so many people work from home, the new facility is only gonna have a couple of offices. There won't be any offices. And you go in and dock in there if you want your laptop. But we're gonna have brand new studios, brand new newsroom. The news people are coming back in. We're gonna have a functioning newsroom where there's a lot of energy still. State of the art. It's gonna be a beautiful facility. And now I love it. I like it. And I was in another market a few weeks ago who has that now. And I was like, this is great. I love this. I just set my computer up and did my work. And it's not at all like I thought, but I'll continue to work from home most of the time. But I like what they're thinking. And as a result, that will lower their costs, so that hopefully they'll cut their overhead and not have to get rid of people.
Well,
Yeah.
I admit, if I were in church, I'd say I'm repentant, but
Yeah.
I was a GM who for decades said, we can't work remotely.
I'm sold.
My sales staff would come to me and say, oh, come on, just a couple of days. No, I'm not doing that. You know what, we can't. And I think it's incumbent on us to figure out, what is that, what's the combination, what's the hybrid look like? And by the way, to recruit and retain staffs today, if you're not doing that, your competitors probably are, and other industries are. And they're gonna beat us to the punch if we don't address it.
And that's something, talking about, Bob was talking about efficiencies and lessons learned. That's the one thing we figured out pretty quick. We really need a giant building to house everyone. When you can send a reporter up with gear home, and then from their home, go straight to the story, whatever they're doing, work remotely, edit on the laptop, send everything back. Not only go live for the TVU, but go live through your cell phone. Pretty decent quality. So these are things that we're discovering. So in worst case scenarios going forward, we took a few notes. Okay, what did we learn from this that we can move, that we can use going forward in our daily work? Just maintain the work ethic, but still generate the content needed, both digitally and for the broadcast. And we found a lot of efficiencies, a lot of things that worked, a lot of things that were carried forward. It really is. We had a couple of our anchors anchoring from home, set up with a $50 iRig that plugs a microphone in and an IFB, dialed into the control room, and they actually anchored the newscast from the dining room. Give them a little bit of a backdrop with a monitor with the logo behind them, and it did not suck. It actually it played pretty good. You know, if you have a lot of movement and stuff, it might digitize a bit, but sitting straight, delivering the news, and they have access to ENPX or a newsroom system on their computer. They're seeing their script right in front of them. A cell phone set up, a little light. We pulled it off. So we know we can do this now. If this ever were to happen again, this time around we know what to do.
Well, and if it happens again, Bob, is there an end to this? No, we're probably 2-3 years from things looking even close to what was normal. I think that's the reality of what we live in.
I'd like to say, I'm going to have a family environment at WRBL-TV, so thank you, David, thank you, Connor. I love the journalists that we had, but I definitely know that we got really frustrated whenever we thought the pandemic was over or getting close to being over and shut. I'm sure you know. And then the numbers pick back up, and it's like, okay, 2 more years. So
We lifted our mask mandate station. We did.
Bring
it back. Bring it back. And I literally, it was the day I was moving out of my house, and I had to stop. And and think about this and how am I gonna communicate that? And again, instead of being able to go around the building, send out an email, and, you know, it's this roller coaster.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I think the resilience that we all have developed, and, you know, we'll look back on this and, you know, like I said at the beginning, 4, you know, huge events to happen in the course of really 10 months. We'll look back at this, and I think we will be better for it. Definitely, you know, some bruises and some scars that'll be left behind. But, you know, I'm really, you know, as a, you know, I always consider myself a journalist. I'm not, you know, as a GM now, I'm not in the news product, but I'm really proud of, you know, our profession, and the resiliency we show and have to continue to show, because one thing we really didn't get into a lot was just the anger towards the media. These days,
Well, that was
the
one thing.
weaponized anger. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There was one thing I wanted to mention about when we say what have we learned, and we talk about social justice, we haven't really talked about that much. But I know when George Floyd was murdered and that video came out, and I remember I was already working from home at that point, I was very thankful, because as a manager, I'm not supposed to show emotion and size and all that. But as a black person, I was very wounded by that experience. Seeing a black man die on TV because he was black was traumatic. And so I immediately started calling members of my team who were black, just to see, are you okay? How are you handling this? Are you processing this? But one thing that I'm so proud of CNG for doing, our company decided to use this as a way to address diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only within the community, but within our company as a whole. And we have this thing called a garage project, where we bring people from all of the stations together with corporate, all different reporters, anchors, managers, everybody. Sales, marketing, news, we all come together. And so we brainstormed, how can we take this terrible thing that happened and seize on this momentum, this thing that's happening within our country, where this is now a conversation that the country is willing to have, and sort of open up the dialogue. And so we came up with this project called Gets Real, which you may have seen on our air, but it goes beyond just what we do on the air. It's also how we hire and promote, it's how we market, and how we approach the community. And it's opened up some very raw discussions in our newsroom, and some that have taken, you know, a couple of hours to make sure that it was very necessary. But it's also made us all, I think, just more aware as journalists. Because one, you're aware of the people that you're working with. We're all different. We all have different perspectives. Diversity isn't just about race, it's also age, it's religion, it's just the way you think. You know, and being more respectful and mindful of that, which I think has also improved our product. Because when we're going out to our communities, we're still keeping that same mindset. So I think that's one thing that's been incredibly positive that's come out of that.
I think those discussions in our newsrooms.
Yeah,
our
and I think
stations.
what Tracy's saying, and all we've been through, in many ways, we're so much closer. We're getting there, and, you know, we're looking out for each other, you know, when we're out in the field and going through all of this. You know, I've even found that in some cases, I think working from home, I've been more efficient. I do like the camaraderie, and I do go out in the field, obviously, every day. But I start my day from home, and, you know, I'm efficient. There's not somebody that I'm not distracted. I get my assignment, I get going, and I'm out the door, and then I'm with my co-pilot, you know, whoever I'm with that day. And, you know, we're looking out for each other. We're working as hard as we can to deliver the best story that we can, and do it, you know, in a safe manner as well. And so all of that's good. One thing that's helped me, I didn't really talk about this either, and that is, you know, how do you get through this? Because there is, you know, we're going through such a difficult time, like, you know, and I mentioned the hamster and the hamster wheel analogy. Like, what do we do so we stay sane, you know, because it's tough, everything we're dealing with. One thing that I've found to help me through this. There have been several great stories of humanity that have come out of all of this. I mean, to name a couple, I know early in the pandemic, found out about this guy in Griffin, and he's a bagpipe player. And every single night at 8 o'clock, the entire community would come and sit up in his front yard, and he would come out of the front door and play his bagpipes. And people, had their distance, they were outside, but it was such a beautiful story of community and humanity. I gotta mention the Braves, because the Braves, are making a run at it. We hope they get it done tonight. But last year, with no fans being in the Interest Park, if you're a Braves fan, you've probably seen Timothy Miller. He's the tenor that sings "God Bless America." I was just fascinated with that guy, and found out he's a music professor at Morehouse College. And so I reached out and I said, I want to tell you the story. And we did that, and we did it, and actually went into the ballpark during the pandemic year. No fans there, this guy's belting out "God Bless America." And it's those kind of stories that you can find that I think will help you through this and add a little variety and make you feel good about, who we are as people and community and humanity. And so that's helped me. And now, as we've seen somewhat of a decline, they've brought back some franchises. I do a weekly franchise, and that helps me. I do that once a week, and I say that one day out of the week I go to the island, and I disappear to the island for one day, where I can actually go do something that, gives me a little bit of a break from the same.
Feeds your soul.
Yeah, it feeds your soul. And if there's anything like that you can do, or those stories that you can find, they really do help. And they help you, they break it up a little bit and make you feel good about what you do, and like you said, feed your soul.
And it helps our viewers,
Yes.
right? Because we're
Yes.
throwing up all this negativity
That's
for
right.
them every day.
That's right.
And so if we can have something that has some redeeming quality of our community and our society, it helps them too.
That's right.
But I think the question I want to ask is there a concern we're going to return back to our old habits? And I've got 10 of them.
We will.
And I'll give you a couple examples. I felt like with the Asian spa shootings, I felt like, oh my God, we're going right back to the way we used to do things, Now, I think in the weeks afterwards, we all realized, okay, how should we have handled this? I know we all did diversity training, but we went back to our old habits. And same with those of us at the state
Help me
capitol.
understand what you mean by old habits, just not digging into the
Are we
deeper
digging-
issues, or is it just?
How do you dig into the history of the victims? How does that play into it? Because I know I heard
Stereotype.
Yeah, the Asian stereotypes, the spas, and are we going back to because that's what we've always done. Is like, okay, we look into everybody's background, and just like we always, way back when, we'd only look at the background of somebody, a suspect. We never really looked in the background of the officers to see if an officer had an incident with a person. We're starting to kind of figure, then like with Asian spa, and then at the state capitol, it feels like we're going back to our old kind of habits of how I'm trying to put into words what's going on at the capitol. This feels like we're kind of going back to, instead of trying to figure this side, instead of trying to figure out what's going on actually at the capitol, what's actually moving and not moving.
Just the noise.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
There you go, I got it.
So, I am wondering, I still think we've got a lot of things figured out, we've improved a lot of things, but I do wonder, are there gonna be things we're gonna go back to old habits?
That one may be bigger than us, the polarization.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be able to have much of an impact on that. I will tell you, the research that we have with local, there is a difference between how they see us and how they see networks. And we need to hold on to that and pronounce ourselves as local.
Yes.
We live in these communities, we care about these communities. There is no political opinion entering into our coverage, and they need to hear that. They're reminded of that.
I'd like to follow up on what Adam just said, and it's a little self-serving, and I haven't seen all the awards tonight, the entries, but I think tonight is gonna be one of those opportunities. I know just with what General Carden and Dr. Tooley said. And the video that Mackenzie put together is gonna put our best foot forward. And I think a lot of the award winners are gonna have stories like the bagpiper or something like that that are gonna be, I think we're gonna walk out tonight feeling a lot better about what we're in. And what we did during it. And, this has been a great session. I knew it would be. It's been a little bit darker than I was expecting. So
We're journalists.
We need to
Good job.
get off on chess.
But I really think that tonight, and if but again, at the risk of sounding self-serving, the fact that we pulled this damn thing off. It is a celebration of our industry and our resilience and that sort of stuff. And again, I think tonight is gonna be an opportunity for us to celebrate our industry. At least that's
Agreed.
what I'm hoping for.